And the other thing to say in terms of advising people who are in this position, if it's a dribble of things and it's nothing too drastic, you can probably live with it. But there will come a point where you're not being true to yourself, and the self censorship and the cutting off bits of your own soul internally because you don't say anything is worse than saying something, being honest, being true to yourself, living by truth rather than living by life, actually actively living by truth. Um, Even if you lose your job, even if um, things go horribly pear shaped in a practical sense, at least you can look yourself in the mirror every day.
Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall, it's an absolute joy to talk to you. It really, really is. And for those of our viewers who don't know you, a quick summary, if I may, of your case. You're a Church of England minister
Yep,
who happened to be in a Church of England school,
that's correct.
and you suggested to the children in one lesson that actually it might be okay to believe what the Church of England teaches about marriage and sexuality.
One correction to that: it wasn't a lesson; it was a sermon in a chapel service.
Oh, right. So,
So, in
okay.
the
So,
context of a Christian act of worship, I
right.
suggested you may hold these Christian viewpoints.
Okay, so a Church of England minister in a Church of England school giving a Church of England sermon as a Church of England act of worship, and you dare to suggest that it might be okay to believe what the Church of England doctrine says about marriage and sexuality, and for that, you were not only fired from your position, and we can talk about you eventually got that back, but you ended up being reorganized out of the organization anyway. You were not only fired, but also you were reported to a terrorist watchdog who have since exonerated you. And you're still unable, obviously, it makes working for you unable since, but you're still suspended effectively from the Church of England as a safeguarding risk
That's correct.
because of that thing you just did. Have I missed anything, Bernard?
No, that's the key things. Yeah, that's essentially it. So I was also reported to the council, the sort of local authority designated officer for safeguarding,
Right.
and he said there was nothing of concern, but the church safeguarding officers have carried on with their um, investigation of me.
Right. Well, Bernard, it's absolutely staggering, and I'm sure everyone hearing this just thinks it's. And a lot of people know your story, and you've been wonderfully supported by the marvelous Christian Legal Centre, of course, in all of this. What I thought I would talk to you about, if it's okay, Bernard, is just to. And I appreciate you must have gone over the story so many times, and you are of course a married man, middle-aged man, you've got a child. These things aren't easy for anybody to put up with. So I wanted to delve in a little bit to how we can help others in a similar situation. But first of all, just to explore maybe the the situation as you see it that brought you to such an absurd point in life where something completely incomprehensible and unpredictable maybe like that happened because well it's almost like beyond explanation, isn't it?
It is, and well, there are so many different areas you could think about in terms of how we got to this. I mean, I suppose one of the things is the decline of religion in our society in general, sort of Christian faith, um, which used to be sort of the bedrock on which society operated, the sort of shared values, even if people weren't particularly practicing Christians, they nevertheless had a sense of Christian values. They understood what the Christian message was. They could access biblical stories, parables of Jesus, and you could refer to something from the Bible, and people would know what it was. Um, and that is over the last couple of generations that has disappeared to a large extent. You can no longer take it for granted that people know some of these references. Undergraduates arriving to do English literature now have to be given a course in the Bible so that they understand the biblical references that are scattered across so much of
Everything, yeah.
everything in British literature for the last
Woven through
thousand
the very
years.
fabric of our culture
Yeah,
in every sense.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's largely gone. So there isn't even a folk memory of Christianity in many ways. Um, and therefore, when I stand up and say something which is simply, you may accept the teachings of the Church of England on matters of marriage, there isn't that base understanding of, well, yeah, that is what the church teaches. So it was being disputed by members of the senior leadership about whether the church actually teaches that marriage is properly only of a man and a woman for life. And the head at one point said, if I hope that isn't the Church of England's position, because I don't want it to be.
Well, really, whereas in fact doctrinally it absolutely is.
Well, absolutely, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's not good enough when you're disciplining a member of staff for stating a viewpoint to hope that your member of staff was incorrect about the viewpoint. Because effectively what I'm saying is the Church of England thinks this, you may also think this.
Quite remarkable. And this, of course, so we've got tens of thousands of supporters, Bernard, and they come from all faiths and none. The majority would be Christians of some flavour or other. The considerable majority. I'm a Christian myself. But the surprising thing is that even the secular evidence supports beyond doubt that in terms of best outcomes for kids growing up with your married mum and dad, biological mum and dad, brings about the best outcomes. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean that saying that casts aspersions on anyone or anything else in society. But surely, it's like we're okay telling people there are good ways of eating and bad ways of eating. And some are better than others. And that doesn't mean that if you make the choice to eat bad, that someone's going to, be prejudiced against you in school or something else like that. But we convey those things to people. Yet something which actually dictates your outcomes in life in terms of education, mental and physical health and well-being, your propensity to get involved with the criminal justice system, all those things which the secular evidence base is absolutely unambiguous on. Yet the school takes offence when you refer to it.
Yeah, and I think that's partly in the way that our society now works is so much about feelings, and you can't hurt somebody's feelings, even if what you're saying is true and expressed in a fairly neutral way. The risk of it hurting someone's feelings is too great. And one of the bizarre things about the whole process was that the school's safeguarding lead, who seems to have driven a lot of what happened to me, objected to me talking about marriage as a positive thing, full stop, regardless of Christian marriage and just man-woman marriage, because she took the view that because lots of children in the school would have parents who were divorced or separated or remarried, and potentially same-sex parenting, that it would hurt their feelings effectively to make them feel they weren't normal or something, because I was talking about the ideal of marriage, which is a nonsense, because, as you say, all the evidence is very clear that marriage and the raising of children by the children's own two parents is an ideal form, which has benefits and departures from that norm. Although very often people have good outcomes with non-traditional parenting, the statistical average is that the chances are you're not going to get the good outcomes. And it shouldn't be controversial to say that, in the same way that it shouldn't be controversial to say in a school, you should think about going to university. You will improve your life chances by going to university, as long as you do sensible subjects and not some of the Mickey Mouse courses that exist these days. So in a school, it's okay to say go to university where children's parents haven't necessarily been to university. But you can't say think positively about marriage because children's parents haven't necessarily got married. And the disconnect between those two ways of thinking. And so there's something about the family and marriage that is treated differently. And there are various reasons for that, I think. But one of those is that and the whole question of same-sex couples comes into it. And if you say marriages of a man and a woman for important reasons, particularly to do with procreation of children and the raising of children, you are somehow attacking same-sex attracted people, same-sex couples. And it's it's not just that you're saying, well, I happen to have a different viewpoint to you, which ought to be how it is, and they're allowed their own viewpoint, and people should be free to express their viewpoints. But expressing a viewpoint somehow attacks the very nature of a person. So if someone's identity is built on, I'm gay and I'm proud, if someone says, well, actually, being gay is not necessarily the be all and end all, and when it comes to marriage and family life, I'm going to have a different opinion about whether being gay is not
Yeah.
the ideal that is set before us that works, we know works in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
parenting.
Yeah.
Um,
And the evidence would agree with you
yeah,
in terms of lifestyles and
yeah, yeah.
things like
So
that,
I'm not saying it's
outcomes. Yeah,
inherently
absolutely.
unhealthy. I'm saying the positive virtues
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
traditional marriage are there to see. When we say we have a different ideal, that is interpreted by some people and increasingly in our culture, I think, as you are not ideal. You as a person are less than a person. You as a person are invalid. You as a person deserve to die. You as a person deserve to be cast into the ovens of the Holocaust and whatever. That's the sort of steps that people think they're hearing if you simply say, well, I'm all in favour of traditional marriage, which is not an attack on any individual person. It's not an attack on the choices a certain person makes. It's not an attack on how a person understands their identity in terms of their sexual attractions in any way, shape, or form, and nor should it be interpreted as such. But too many people think it is an attack on the person, an attack on the person's very nature and their right to exist and whatever. So you hear this sort of stuff in social media discussions, particularly, I have a right to exist. My sexuality is not an ideology. No one said it was. No one said you didn't have a right to exist. We just have some different opinions on some things which we think are quite important for the benefit of society and for the good of the children we bring into society. That's all. So, the different sides of this debate are hearing the same words in very, very different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this I don't know how much of it is what you might call toxic empathy. That people who probably have kind hearts, but this idea of goodness to a fault, that actually, well, you, your empathy has gone too far. It's now gone into the realms where it's actually indulging people in areas which aren't going to do them any good, and is actually going to have a radical effect on wider society. Not least, good chaplains lose their jobs.
Yeah, indeed. And I think, if you think about what love actually is in the Christian account, it's not just a set of feelings. It's something you can will, you can choose to love, because it's a set of behaviors and a code of conduct in many ways, as much as it is a set of feelings. And I think as Thomas Aquinas defines love as desiring the good of the beloved, desiring the ultimate good of the beloved. So if I desire your good, I need to have a sense of what good actually is and what good looks like, so that I can desire it for you and so that I can help you to attain it. And the Christian understanding of good, it ultimately rests in God. Of course it does. It's not how you feel about something. It's not, it is good for you right at the moment to have that ice cream you desire. Well, the Christian will say, no, that's not good, because if you eat lots of that ice cream, your health will suffer. So the good thing is sometimes to say, no, you can't have the ice cream. And therefore, the loving thing is to say, no, you can't have the thing you desire. The thing you desire is not necessarily good for you. So love is not that, yes, as you said, toxic empathy that always wants people to feel nice and comfortable. Christianity rejects that fundamentally as a misunderstanding of goodness, misunderstanding of love. And, Jesus says, take up your cross daily and follow me. He doesn't say, follow the easy path, the nice path, the comfortable path,
The
good path.
broad path, the broad easy path, as opposed to the narrow
Exactly.
difficult one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's we are in a post evidence age, post data. Nobody cares about the evidence and the data. It's all about my version of truth and my version of good, and there is no objective truth and objective standard. But in terms of your experience now? I mean, you obviously are well known because of this, and you have suffered greatly because of this. But I'm just conscious that at the end of the day, this isn't an institution that did this to you. It is individuals, individuals who are relatively anonymous, individuals who, however this works out in the end, uh, won't be personally held accountable, because if you sue your former employer, for example, they won't pay anything. An insurance policy will, a local authority insurance policy, or something else will take care of it, and the individual will go on unscathed. Individual or individuals. What to me that's very difficult, because that lack of accountability means it doesn't stop people, it doesn't make them think, am I doing the right thing? I mean, first of all, you said they'd fundamentally misunderstood the doctrine of the Church of England, which governed what they should be teaching and doing anyway. They weren't aware of it. And they didn't seem to be cognizant of the seriousness of that lack of awareness.
Yeah, and indeed were so unaware that they thought what I was saying was extreme enough to report me to the anti-terrorism watchdog.
It's just beyond belief, isn't it?
Indeed.
I mean, what do we do? First of all, because it strikes me that while people, employers, head teachers, other people, there is simply no consequence to them for ruining people's lives, they'll carry on doing it. What do we do about that?
Oh, that's really difficult, and I struggle with that, because in one sense you turn the other cheek, and you get on with it. But one of the reasons why I've chosen to be public about my situation, and to take that legal action against the school and various others, is precisely because it affects other people, this kind of thing, and if I can win legal cases, it potentially allows other people to speak more freely, and that's an important thing that's worth having. And it doesn't desperately help me, but it might help others. And I suppose in the course of legal proceedings, if they find in my favour, and if we get a judgment that certain people have discriminated against me, then the disciplinary process ought to kick in with the school, wherever, with the people who have hounded somebody out of a job, effectively, who have brought upon their company, on their school, on their local authority, whatever the organisation, they brought upon them an unfavourable legal case by their conduct, and you would hope that people would be publicly seen to suffer the consequences of their own misconduct. Except I don't wish evil on anybody, and I certainly wouldn't wish what I've had to go through on anybody, even the people that have done it to me. So it's a difficult one, because if people don't see the consequences of misconduct, which is, I think, what's happened to me, not by me, then activists, people who have got a bee in their bonnet about particular topics, will carry on doing what they're doing. And you see this in sort of discussion online, in blogs and whatever, about the various legal cases that have been fought, with some gender critical cases, Maya Forstater and various others. There's a section of the commentariat who simply don't accept the result, and will simply say, well, yes, the gender critical people won this court case, but we'll still carry on being trans right activists full on. And even lawyers giving bad advice to potential clients about what the law allows them to do, rather than saying being gender critical is a protected characteristic in law, that belief is protected, and therefore people are allowed to express it in a reasonable way. They say, well, the belief is protected, but expressing it isn't, and therefore you can still have workplace rules against expressing gender critical beliefs, which is clearly not right. But the activists won't give in, because they're activists. So it needs some activists to experience the consequences of their activism for the others to back off. And regrettably, that means that certain individuals in this scenario suffer the consequences and lose jobs or whatever.
Yeah, which is where you are really. And in terms of, I mean, I don't want to pry into the effect this has had on you because I can only imagine. But I mean, hopefully you know that there are a lot of people on your side and you have an awful lot of supporters. But that doesn't help you in the middle of the night, Bernard. I get that. You know, and it doesn't help you when you're sat around the table with your family and all sorts of other situations. I get that completely. But in terms of because you're in many ways you're not an activist. You're just
No,
a quiet chap getting on with his life, talking about the doctrines that he gave his word he would faithfully uphold when he was ordained. So you're just doing what you were told to do when you were ordained and what you promised to do.
that's right.
Yet you've fallen a cropper from surely from activists on the other side. You mentioned the activist organisation that had come into the school, which were not only giving incorrect legal advice, but were also introducing things into the school which seemed pretty outrageous. I'm just conscious, Bernard, there will be many other teachers and many other people in your situation, some of whom just languish in silence or get fired and can't do anything about it. And I just wonder, are there any lessons you've learned that or any encouragements that you can pass on to others who might have been in or might be in the kind of situation you're in?
It's really difficult to know what to say because everybody's situation is going to be very different. Alexander Solzhenitsyn and his an essay that he wrote sort of the day or was published the day before he was sent into exile from Russia was called "Live Not by Lies," and people can look that up. And the idea is that if everybody stops living by lies, eventually the lie breaks down, and you can do that in subtle ways by just not joining in with the lie, which is not the same as always having to speak the truth. And I spoke the truth because I thought it was my job to speak the truth. But you know, a teacher in a school who's not teaching religious studies, because I think this comes under religion, really, the sort of the woke activism, or isn't teaching PSHE, or a nurse in a hospital ward encouraged to wear the rainbow lanyard or whatever. You don't have to say, no, I'm a Christian, I don't agree with this stuff. You can just not wear the lanyard.
And you can do that perfectly. We've got another video, in fact, just recently with Roger Kiska, outlining your rights as an employee to say, well, no, I'm not wearing that. I'm not adopting those pronouns on my email. I may go to the training because I've got to, because I'm an employee, but I'm not necessarily going to agree with it. And I'm not going to say the things that you want me to say that I fundamentally disagree with.
And so you
Yeah.
don't have to, in the training, stick your hand up and ask the awkward question. You can
Yeah.
simply go away and
And not say it.
think it was
Yeah.
nonsense. But you can
Yeah.
also catch the eye of other people in the training and see who is also feeling exasperated, and afterwards go and say to them, "Oh, so what did you make of that? I I, I thought that was a bit heavy, or I thought they went a bit too far with that," and just test the waters. Because if you can build up a group of people who you understand share the same sort of viewpoints, who aren't completely happy with it, um, then you can bit by bit encourage each other to live less by the lies, and sometimes maybe even to speak a little bit of truth. And the more people in the organization speaking those little bits of truth,
Mm. Mm.
easier it will be when somebody eventually gets fed up and says, no, I'm going to say what I really think, because you know you've got the backing of a group of 5, 10, 20, 50, who however many it might be. You know that there are people who actually agree with you.
It's really interesting because I was speaking to another teacher recently who similarly lost his job for expressing opinions in a staff meeting, not even to students, but in a staff meeting, making other staff feel unsafe.
Oh,
Yep. So and he
nonsense,
became
isn't
a
it?
yeah, and he became a reported safeguarding risk because of his opinions.
Agree.
But you know, he said to me that a significant number of teachers said, we agree with you. We're just too scared to say it too. And his point was, if all of them did say it, they couldn't sack them all because the school would cease to function. You know, and so that's the, you know, actually very good advice. You know who agrees with you, and there's an encouragement for people to not live by those lies and to speak up.
Yeah. So if you can find out in advance that there are people who agree with you, And then there may come a point where you can agree all to sign a letter to the management saying we're a little bit uncomfortable with the way this is proceeding. Could we have a meeting, please, to discuss it? And there's no way that a good management should refuse a meeting to discuss, and then they see the weight of opinion, and they realise that there's an issue in their workforce. That's how it ought to work, of course, when you're dealing with activists. Um, but I think most of the people in the most senior management positions are not activists. It's the
Correct.
people
I would agree with you.
People a step or two lower down are the activists.
Yeah, but those people in senior positions, Bernard, I've had head teachers say to me, "What do you do when you get a phone call from an external organisation who says, 'Can we come in and lead those lessons, or are you homophobic?'" And they know what that means in code. If you don't want us, you won't be ahead for long, because we will publicly say that you're a homophobe, that you refuse to engage us because of your beliefs around this, that, and the other. And you the trustees or the governors will then say, "Look, it's just too awkward having you in place. We'll have to replace you." And so it's very, very difficult so you need people who are brave like yourself, and willing to say, "Well, look, it's not my cup of tea. It's not my preferred option, but actually, for the sake of the weaker brother, for whoever's coming next, I'm going to say something."
And the other thing to say in terms of advising people who are in this position, if it's a dribble of things and it's nothing too drastic, you can probably live with it. But there will come a point where you're not being true to yourself, and the self-censorship and the cutting off bits of your own soul internally because you don't say anything is worse than saying something, being honest, being true to yourself, living by truth rather than living by life, actually actively living by truth. Even if you lose your job, even if things go horribly pear-shaped in a practical sense, at least you can look yourself in the mirror every day.
That's it, Bernard. You have your
It does count
dignity.
for something.
Yeah,
Hard
yeah,
as it is
absolutely right. Yeah,
to lose the
yeah.
practical everyday comforts, actually, what profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul?
There's something about you, Bernard, that just comes through, that you know you've done the right things in the right way and for the right reasons. And I don't know, there's a steel and a confidence in your voice, which behaving in that way gives you, I think.
I'm promised at my ordination to do certain things, to speak the truth of the gospel, and to teach the teachings of the church. And I take ordination vows very seriously, as one should. If you make a vow, you hold to it. That's the nature of how life is.
I think you'd make a pretty good archbishop, but hey ho.
I don't think there's any chance of that happening.
well,
And I
well,
think
never
would
say
make a good
never,
archbishop.
right? but yeah,
I would suggest that people ought to hold to their ordination values and teach the teachings of the church as they
yeah,
actually are, not as they want them to be.
yeah.
And I think that would make me terribly unpopular in large parts of the Church of England. So I
How
don't think I
bizarre is
would
that?
be.
Yeah, how bizarre is that? In terms of going forward, then, Bernard, you've got pending legal cases.
Yes, we had supported by the Christian Legal Centre through Christian Concern, who have been brilliant, not just with the legal help, but pastoral support as well. It's been
Absolutely
amazing,
wonderful. Great.
amazing. But
Yeah, yeah.
so we took the school to the tribunal. We lost at the first instance, so we're appealing that. That appeal will likely be heard late next year. The process can take a very long time. There's
Absolutely.
partly because there's
Yeah.
another legal case touching similar matters that's going to the Court of Appeal in October. And so when we had a preliminary hearing about my appeal, the decision was we have to wait till after that other case has gone through the system because it will affect my appeal, which is legally correct and right, but frustrating that it's going to add an extra year plus.
Absolutely. And what about with the Church of England?
The Church of England, that is still ongoing. So there are various bits sort of churning away in the background, trying to get some kind of resolution. That I've now been cleared in terms of safeguarding by Prevent, the anti-terror thing, by the local authority designated officer twice, as far as I can see. Um, by the Disclosure and Barring Service have cleared me of any wrongdoing. Um, and yet it's the church authorities still think there's a safeguarding thing when the secular authorities have
Mm.
cleared me. So trying to get the church to see sense is proving distressingly difficult, disappointingly difficult. Where really, if they just said, right, we want to sort this out properly, let's regularize your situation, they could do it very easily. So I don't know when that's going to end. We might get a breakthrough next week. We might be still talking about it a year from now.
Yeah, which is inhumane, Bernard. Absolutely inhumane.
Well, I'm not best pleased with it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, Bernard, you really are a modern day superhero. You really
I don't
are.
know. I'm just plodding along the path that I'm being given to walk along. Is that's
Yeah. And how wonderful is that? And if we could just get more Christians who are protected by law. And here's the funny thing, that we've got exceptional protection because of our faith. You mentioned it yourself in other places. You referred in your sermon to the fact that the law gives us equal protection. And the law's very explicit about Christians being able to express their beliefs on these things because of their faith. If there's anything more practical that any of us can do, you've only need to say so, and we'll do anything we can, Bernard.
well. Thank you. I think
Yeah,
for those who pray, prayers are the most important thing. I
without
guess
shadow of a doubt. Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall, it's an absolute privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much for everything you've done, everything you're doing, and all the best for the future.
thank you very much.